Daros la bienvenida a este último acto o sesión del ciclo Argument, que, como sabéis, es una apuesta que ha hecho el departamento por intentar organizar las conferencias del año con una unidad temática, y para ello pues, convoca un pequeño concurso interno entre los profesores, y este año el equipo comisarial lo conforman Pablo Oriol, Fernando Rodríguez, Juan Evia y Fernando Pino, que no sé dónde está, Fernando. Y creo que están haciendo un trabajo estupendo porque el tema que nos han propuesto es confrontar la práctica profesional con las experiencias docentes de determinados arquitectos a nivel europeo, que nos traen información que no es siempre accesible y aprendemos todos, alumnos y profesores. O sea que les doy la enhorabuena y nada, te paso. Gracias a Humberto, ya le he dado las gracias por aceptar la invitación y nada, que allá vamos.
Bueno, buenas tardes, muchas gracias a todos por venir. Voy a presentar muy rápidamente a Humberto para empezar lo antes posible. Humberto, thank you very much for coming today. I'm going to introduce your studio and your figure for a little while, and then we will start. Humberto Napolitano is a member of LAN Architects, which stands for Local Architecture Network. This is a Paris-based office created by Humberto himself and Benoit Jalon. They have centered their activity in France, although they have worked internationally as well with projects in Germany, Lebanon, Chile, and other places. And this studio has received many, many awards and published and exhibited his work everywhere as well. And Humberto, who is the member of LAN we have today here, was born in Naples, and after initially studying literature, he studied architecture in Naples and Paris-la-Villette. He became an architect in 2001, and while working in different offices, he met Benoit. Their diploma thesis was centered in changes in habitat and the new narratives of the city. And it was the basis for setting up their own firm in 2002. Humberto has combined his professional practice with academic activity, and cities and travel are still one of his main obsessions, which have led him to an international trajectory. He has taught recently in Columbia University, and he will start teaching very soon at the AA in London, I think. And nothing more. I think I will leave you to Humberto. Thank you very much for coming. I'm sure it will be a very interesting class. Thank you.
Does it work? Thank you to invite me. It's a pleasure. I have to say that it's very, as you said, I teach in Columbia and now in the AA. I already started in September. Probably I will go back in Columbia next year, so we will see. But neither of these schools has the same feeling that this school, because it's really like the one where I started to study. You know, there are corridors. I said that before, it's fantastic, because the moment where you have a corridor and then you see the rooms and then you feel the scale of the teaching. You know, I have classes with 12, 14 people, and it's very different than, you know, you teach to 100 guy. So in 100, statistically, you will have a good student at the end. And thank you for the invitation, because it was very interesting. It's the first time that I do the parallel consciousness between what we do as a practice and what I try to teach as a teacher. And I learned a lot of things that show how obsessed I am with probably forms and cities. But we will get there. So as you said, LAN means Local Architecture Network. We started the practice in 2002, then in reality it was 2004. We were extremely lucky to do in like 15 years more than 100 projects. Very, very different in terms of sites and typology. This is the diagram, then the ongoing project, which goes from 100 meters square to more than 100,000 meters square. And as you can see here, there is just a selection of them. We do housing, office, like institutional building, theater, and museum. We are doing the extension and the refurnishment of the Grand Palais, which is the biggest French museum, archives, prison, bank, fire station, and now we also do master plan, and then we build a part of the district that we designed. So it has been a very interesting trajectory that doesn't put us in a specific field, which is a bit the danger when you go out from the school and you start a practice. Like they ask for references every time. So if you are lucky to do one project, the first one will be the one that marks your career. So, you start with housing and people believe that you know how to do housing. In reality, you don't know nothing and you can apply the same method to whatever is the typology. But this world is built around, be reassured by references. The studio is an European territory in the sense of, let's say 40% of the studio are French, the rest come from all around Europe. This is a map that we update every year or every 2 years, or to be sincere, when we have time. But it's about create and try to represent the territory of the studio, the influence of everyone and all the city where they come and be part of LAN. So if LAN was a piece of this world, this was the map. The studio, Local Architecture Network, we mean from the beginning that we believe in the fact that architecture has to go over its own discipline. So we started to create a network that before was linked to art, and then it was linked to sociology, philosophy. But the idea is every time to take information, influence from other worlds and try to translate them in architecture. So we also do exhibition books, and we try to enlarge the experience from the build act to whatever is the territory that we decide to go further. So those are few books. One you should buy, which is You Can Be Young and an Architect. I don't know if there are copies, but this is the first 5 years of our practice. We recorded act by act how to start a practice, and it's a very useful book. Then there is Traces, here are, which are monographic book on things, and then there is the new edition, the one on the right of the Haussmann book, which I will speak after. It's a research that we did for 2 years, and this is the catalog. This is, for example, an experience that we have with a musician, where they start to play in one of our first projects, the Archive EDF, and obviously we participate to all the exhibition that we are invited for. That was at the Biennale of Architecture of Kulas. This one was the one of 2016, where we had a room in the main pavilion. And the one in Chicago, where other architects come to see and spy what we do. But I have to say that the base of everything, I don't have the screen, so I will try to read from here, is this conviction of the fact that architecture is extremely linked to city. And whatever is my intervention, I start to reading these few lines from Aldo Rossi, which are the architecture of the city summarize the city forms, and from this form we can consider it the city problem. By architecture of the city, we mean two different things. First, the city seen as a gigantic man-made object, a work of engineering and architecture that is large and complex and growing all the time. Second, certainly more limited but still crucial aspect of the city, namely urban fact, which, like the city itself, are characterized by their own history and thus by their own form. This is a very nice definition. When Aldo Rossi wrote this book, he was 29. He started 29 and he finished at 30. And probably it's the most important things he has done. It's a book where when you read it, that change the way you look at the city. He says two simple things. First is a city, it's a man-made object. So as all the objects, he has rules, physical rules. So you have to understand these forms. It's a scientific approach where you have to understand how things are made, which is the form of these things, which is the materials, which is the period, the structure. So you can explain everything through an analytic approach. But then he had another layer, which he called urban fact. And those facts are all the stratification of politics, historics fact, whatever is the level that go from that abstract image to this very specific, which is about memory and identity. So as an architect, and in LAN, and I think in what I do in school, we try to kind of understand both. The very technical and scientific approach that teach us how to read the city, and then, as an architect, we decide which kind of memory we won't take and we won't develop. So there is a level of subjective approach which stays in this second level. So we try to be contemporary in the way we read the world and be classic in the way we understand our work. And everything is about form. Aldo Rossi says the city has its form and the urban fact has its form. And form is a word which is overused in architecture. Everything is form. The way the definition I want to share with you is the one of Paul Klee, which said, form must on no account ever be considered as something to be go over with, as a result, as an end, but rather as a genesis, grow essence. Form as a semblance is an evil and dangerous spectre. So forms is not how things appears, form is how things move. Form is the beginning of a story that will end in another point. So as an architect, to understand this form, in the studio where I used to say it, form in movement, we have to get into the point where we decide which will be, we give to the form the potential to evolve or to move. I don't know if I'm speaking Chinese, but I will give you few examples that illustrate this idea of the forming movement. One is a project that we did in Bègles. Bègles is a city very close to Bordeaux. So the limit of Bordeaux is the station, and then there is this territory, which is literally is the same urban form that goes over until the river. But it was built, the district where we were supposed to build was built in the after war, following the modern idea of the new city. And in France, you should know that it's the place in Europe that they have built more in 14 years after the war. They have built more than 40,000 million housing apartment. So it was 1 million housing every year. And those entire city has been built following just one idea, the modern precept for the city. And then it ends with what we call cité, the majority of them, and it's the place where the riot happened in the last time. But it's not only about architecture, obviously. It's all about politics and the way they have been occupied. But the majority of this model follow this strict idea of the hygienic modern cities. Bègles was one of them. That was one image of the time where the riot happened, where the buildings were in use, occupied. It was a territory of kind of violence. And the majority of that was because people didn't know what was public, what was private, where they are home, where they are in a collective system. So when space is not defined, when you cannot understand place and uses, but things become very complex because the one that decide to use can be just a singular decision, saying that space is mine. And so this man came, it's Noël Mamère, which is the mayor of the city, but is also the president, was also the president of the Green Party in France. And he did two small acts. One was to link the center of this district to the center of Bordeaux through new connection. One of them was the tram. And second one was to destroy everything. And it was kind of very surprising and very welcome. It was the first destruction of this kind of cité in France. And they did a competition on that, which was won, just for a master plan, which was won by a Dutch studio called Tania Conco, with a sample idea that in Spain, in Italy, we know very well, which is a building, it's a masses, and the limit between public and private, it's the facade of the building. Then inside, it's private, and you can have a courtyard. So a building is a block. And then it's large enough to define with its own standing the public space on the surroundings. So she created these 3, 4, 5 masses to define the street, to define the piazza, and to kind of create a model which was totally the opposite of the one that was there before. So we were invited to a competition for these 3 blocks on the left. And when you won a master plan in France, you do the rules, the urban rules, through what the architects have to build. So you decide how much you can go higher, which is the density. So she built up an entire system made to create masses on the scale of the public space. But the problem was that the competition, so we were allowed to build 14,000 meters square, but the competition was done in 2008 with the financial crisis, and the investor decided to just ask for 7,000 meters square. So with a small house of 2 floors, or a building of 2 floors, we could achieve the surface objective. But it was very interesting for us because this gray space, this undefined space, was the beginning of a research that we did at the time where probably it was before an intuition and then it ends up in a form, but the idea was, can I combine together the quality of the single family house and the collective system? And if I have to pick up things from these 2 opposite models, what I take? So the single family house is the fact that you have a garden, you have no neighborhood, you enter your property from the outside and then you get inside, and you are totally independent. The collective system is the fact that you share resources. So you share water, you share electricity, you don't occupy the ground, you are dense, and you have the sense of the community. So searching about that, we end up with this form, which was just a superposing single-family house, where whatever was the flat, he has 4 void, and the void which was on the left was sold with the flat. So you have no neighborhood, but in the same time, you share the structure, you share all the resources, and you could eventually occupy this void with time and with kind of an auto-construction. So if the flat was, the idea was at the beginning, if the flat was 100 meters square, you could have 100 meters square of void that you can build with time. We were very, very young when we did this project. And the apartment looked like that, so it's fantastic. The building is just 7 meters large, which is kind of crazy, because instead to pay just 2 facades, you pay 4 facades every time. So on the paper is extremely expensive. Each flat has 3 exposures, 1 in the street, 1 in the courtyard, and 1 in the garden, in your void, in your winter garden. And I don't know how, but they let us win the competition. And we had to start this very long construction. It took 7 years because the only things we had was the fixed price. And the fixed price was very low. So it was like 1,000 euro meter square, which is kind of the ratio of a social housing in this area. But we doubled the surface, so we had to pay like, not the double, but you have to understand that we had to pay all the void with the same money, and the money was already very strict for just to build something which was very thin, 7 meters. So, as I said, we were young, so we started with a student process, like, okay, let's do a parking, and then we prefabricate everything, and then with just 4 panels, I do the 3 building, and these things will allow me to spend less, which was not the case. We reached the objective just sharing the market without the intermediary, which means that we have worked at the end with kind of 110 enterprise. There was a guy that do just interrupter, and there was a guy that just paint the parquet, or whatever was the action, we were directly searching for the right person without any intermediary. But it takes a long time. So that was a drawing for the competition, 2050, and the idea was that in 2055, the building could fit with an extension made by his own inhabitant. And we did it at the end. So as you see, we provide the facade for the void space. All the flats are very different, but every time, if you look the one on the top, every time you have a void which is almost the size of your apartment. So it was not about detailing. We really like that. If you see our project, they are this one was made just with the standard pieces. So whatever was the piece of the building that was on the market, on the catalog, let's say, the guardrail, the concrete in exterior, the one interior, the windows, everything is made with a research on which is the best relationship between quality and prices, and how I can put together all those pieces. Okay. And then, as you see, in this one, the space that allowed the form to move, it's the void. It's the fact that people could start to build, and I have seen, I don't have the picture, but the project was exhibited in the Biennale of Aravena, and we were there to do a film with the inhabitants, and some of them are already built a small room for their new child or a kitchen outside, so the building is already changed, even if the exterior is still exactly the same, because we built the moving facade. So the place where the form has started to evolve was this gray space, which was the void we was allowed. But that's happened very rarely. Normally, when you can build, you build. So the second example I would like to give you to understand this forming movement is a project which is in Paris, where each meter square is extremely expensive. And it's in the last district, which is ongoing now. It's called Saussure, Batignolles. It's the north of Paris. We were called to design in a competition this small triangle on the left, the last pieces before the Haussmannian system. And that was the image that the city gave us on the brief. Honestly, it's very nice, but it's not Paris. When you see this image, it looks like whatever is the district we are building in Europe since 20 years. You have a park, everything is ecological, and then you call different architects, in function of the talent of each of them, they try to dialogue together, and they do this kind of new, post-modern, ecological city. You find that in London, in Hamburg, in Berlin, in Paris, wherever you go, you will find an image like that. So when we started the competition, we asked ourselves, what's Paris? That was the beginning of the research that then has become an exhibition. But what's Paris? And Paris, it's very simple. It's a city which is an extrusion of the ground, 27 meters high. It's the densest city in Europe. It's a city which we will see after when I will speak about the school, but it's a city that is built around the intelligence of the void, and it has been built with one element through 5 guys, especially Haussmann, that built from 53 to 1914, 60 years. In 60 years, they have done 60% of the building of the city and 60% of the street, which means that the identity of the city has been done in 60 years. 60 years is the time through what we build district now. You have to imagine that all those buildings, they were done in just 50 before the war. I will go that later, but the tools for develop the city was what we called in France immeuble de rapport, investment property. So they started to, for the first time, to build building without knowing who will use it. The idea was a financial approach where families built to rent, and then with the rent, they pay the loan. The map you have seen before, 40% of the map is built on following this financial system. So it's called the building immeuble de rapport, the building that make you gain money. And this building in just 2 centuries, or 1.5 centuries, he has demonstrated an extremely intelligent in his form. He has become school, theater, galleria, shopping, whatever is the function. He was built to be an housing, but he is a resilient form that goes back in different function, stealing exactly the same system and the same building. And he also gives the identity of the city. And he can decline itself being a block or being a building or being a part of the block. So when we did this competition, we started to study which were the things in this building that allow the building to be so flexible, and how we can retranslate that in a contemporary way. And the system is extremely banal and very easy. 50% of the facade is in glass, is empty. And that comes from a nice story that I discovered after. To control the development, after Haussmann was used to go to the notary office in the sale and saying, whatever you do with your land, when you buy a land, you have to have the facade which continues the facade of your neighborhood. And you have to have the facade with these materials and with this kind of opening. So the architects designed the facade before designing the plan. And by that, the facade is extremely flexible, because they even don't know what was in the back of this facade. So it's regular grid, which can allow you to do a night, a bedroom, or a living room, or an office, or whatever you want, because it's made on the idea that a space in the back could go from 20 meters square to more than 100 meters square. Then it's a compact system, which drives things that we have lost after the war. In the same building, the ground floor is like 4 or 6 meters. Then you have the first floor, which is 2.8 meter height. Then you have 4.5, 3.3, and then 3, and then 3.2, and then 2.8. In the same building, each floor has a different volume than the one before. Since the Second War and this industrialization of the construction, when you do housing, you do 3 meters from slab to slab. When you do office, you do 3.6 from slab to slab. The buildings are totally monofunctional because they are, the way we build, it's extremely based on standard. What is interesting here, and what this building allows, is the fact that normally you have an office on the first floor, and then someone lives on the second floor, and then there are students on the top with this small room, which are called chambre de bonne. So there is a mix inside the structure in itself. And then it's totally prefabricated. In the exhibition, we found the catalog where people start to buy just the pieces of the building. So whatever is the investment you did, if you have money or not, the structure and the intelligence of the form was exactly the same, because the rest is just an addition by the catalog. The structure is very easy to understand, and there is these fantastic things that the ground floor is connected to the first floor without using the common stairs, which allows the commercial surface of the city to double its size. So when McDonald's arrive, they buy the ground floor and the first floor, and if it's a small bakery, they just stay on the ground floor, and the first floor someone lives. And this is everywhere. And you will see after, it's the base of what gives to Paris the most elevated number of activity in Europe in kilometer square. It's the fact that every building is ready to guest something, and it can double this surface. That stands over the style, because it starts on the beginning of the 19th century, and it goes after the Art Nouveau. And it was clear from the beginning, because at the time it was a problem of social classes. So the buildings were conceived to have different range, different volume, just because people need different space and need also different trajectory inside the building to move without putting together the serfs and the bourgeoisie. So we tried to translate that in contemporary projects. So we built up a system where the structure was in the facade, so totally free in terms of plane. And then we connected the ground floor with the first floor with an inside system. And then we grow up with only one window, the entire building, and we calculate this window on the office standard. So it's 1.35, which is the standard used in Europe to build offices. We also give to the slab the possibility to the same charge than office, which is most elevated than housing. And then when we needed a balcony, we just put off a loggia with the same windows in the back, or sometimes with a system which is prefabricated and you can put off. But we so this was the document of the competition. It was very brave from us because no one's asked for, in a certain sense. We arrived, they said, can you do an housing building? And we arrived, we said, okay, we will do a flexible tools that can be housing on the left and offices on the right. And then when we won, we increased this idea of putting everything in the facade. So in the facade, which is a prefabricated facade, you have the electricity, the water, the solar control, everything is in this first skin. So when you have to change in 20 years, whatever is the question you ask for, you will find the solution in the module of the facade. Whatever is the plug you have to do, everything passes in this space. And as you see, it's just a Lego, it's a composition of that. Then we moved the windows in function of the orientation, some loggia. And what's nice is by the plot itself that becomes Parisian, we call that a corner building in Paris. And it's like a catalog of situation in the city. By the fact that we were free, the typology are very different. And it's not like when you do different typology, you also allow different people to come in the building. If you go for a very small apartment to a very large apartment, you will have from a very young guy to a very large family. And that's very interesting in terms of developing mixity in the city. And even if they were not conceived to be housing, the high was between office and housing, it was 3.2, 3.3, and they are extremely qualitative because everything is glass and you have this view everywhere. And that was the section in 2055. So here the forms could move through the intelligence of the form itself, to the potential that we gave to this form to change. And probably this obsession in me comes from my origin. I found this definition of Brancusi, which was referred to sculpture, which said all the sculpture are forms in movement, but you can just change the word sculpture with architecture. And I remember, I'm sure that in Spain you have the same. There is this kind of development when you do single-family house. So the south of Italy, where I come from, the landscape is just punctuated by this million of beginning of something that a day will become an housing. But the nicest things in this figure is the fact that, as you see, the steel going up, staying and waiting for an extra floor one day. So in the south of Italy, people build structure and build potential before they even build the housing, before they even build the family. They don't know who will be the child who will take this probably first floor, but I like the idea that the sense of the meaning of architecture is already there. I will build something, but I will let the potential to this something to become something else. And it's all just with the small act of leaving the steel and charge the structure for eventually get another floor. So you understand what's the movement of the form. The point is, how do you read the form and how do you choose it? And Matisse said something very interesting. He says, we want something else. We work towards serenity through simplification of idea and form. The ensemble, it's our only idea. Details lessen the purity of the line and harm the emotional intensity. We reject them. What does it mean? As an architect, you cannot reject details. But I think that techniques, technology, expression, they have to be controlled enough to be forget. One of the most incredible series of pictures that I know in architecture is made by a Japanese photographer, which is called Sugimoto. I don't know if you know that series. And it's the only one that gives back the essence of the building itself, just being blurred. You know, when you see this picture, you know that is the Opera of Sydney, you know what is the meaning of the project, but you don't see nothing else. Everything is there without being too precise. And so to capture the form, I think that sometimes we should do the same exercise. We should blur our eyes, forget the function, forget the materials, forget the details, forget everything. And if your project works in that sense, probably you are close to something too interesting. So it's what we try to do every time. So there are a few of them which are masterpieces. But you know, when you see that, everything is there. Everything. The windows, the pilotis, the shadows. A sunset on the sea. It's nice, no? And so the project I want to show you, it's almost that. It's a form which has been conceived to be the essence of this form in itself. It's a long process. Also, this one is one of our first projects. It's in Bure. Bure is one of the smallest cities in France. In Italian, we have a very nice expression for that. We call, when a place is very far from everything, we say it is in Colonia, like in the place where no one will go. So Bure, it's in Colonia of France, and it's a very small city. 80 people live there, and it's called to Mandran-Barnois on the right, 100 people. So Bure on the north. And Sodron, 110 people. So it's literally nowhere. And they launched an international competition to build the National Archive for EDF. That was the place. I mean, a very basic and banal landscape, extremely boring. And this is like that region of France, which is called La Meuse. It's like that everywhere. It's extremely depressing. So that was the client. The client is the largest world producer of electricity, EDF. I don't know which is the correspondent in Spain, but it's the one that gives us the electricity, and he sold the nuclear electricity to mostly cities in Europe. So he produced 84% of his production, it's nuclear, and I think 80% renewable. And so I think they are dead, but all their communication is based in those kind of image. And the competition expressed a bit this paradox between what they are and what they would like to be, or what they would like people see them. And so in the brief, there was this idea of building an archive, so a place where you have to conserve, document, microchip on the national nuclear production, build an example, build the less consuming building in Europe, build a kind of manifesto of virtuosity. So they did an international competition. We were the young supposed to lose, but the strong film were there. So building a model, but in the same time, do that in a way that no one has to see. So the model is in Colonia, and the model has to be a flat building. They suggest the form, a flat building of just one floor. So we were through the history of archive, and you will never find an archive of one floor in the entire history of archive. Just because it's all about capacity, it's all about keeping a temperature and humidity. So you don't need windows, you need a compact figure, extremely utilitarian in the way it's done, And in this compact, you have to have 16 degrees, so less facade you have, included the roof, more performing you are. And when you get in this history, at a certain point, you will discover that the majority of archives in the world, they are driven by Mormon. So the Mormon, they have built their own fortune in doing archives, software for archiving, shelves for archiving, whatever is linked to archive. And why that? Because they started this knowledge by archiving themselves. So there is the National Archive, the genealogical archive of Mormons in Salt Lake, where, I'm sure that there are no Mormons here, but if you are Mormons, all the information on you are in this place. So I was lucky in that period. I had a few money on the side. I decided to take a plane. There was a festival of cinema there, which is called Sundance. So I was to sing the festival, and then I decided to visit the archive. And the mother of all the archive is a mountain, which is emptied in the middle with 2 doors. So it's like the maximum of the capacity that you can have, the center of a mountain. So we were back in France, and we decided to kind of, also because when you are young, honestly, and you are invited in a competition, try to find every time an alternative way or you will never win. So we decided to don't go for what they suggest, which was this terrace morphology, and build a big block of 5 level, extremely compact, in the middle of nothing, because it was the middle of nothing. And we did this pedagogical approach where we showed to the client that for the same net floor area, so around 7,000 meters square, the envelope surface, the facade, was the double in the terrace morphology compared to the cube morphology, included the roof. And so whatever you do, before you hit or you cold the building, you already need half of the energy. So just the form in itself was extremely interesting compared to the terrace morphology. Then we showed to him that for 2 trips a week, the people that worked inside the building, they had to do in 1 week 12 kilometers instead to do 3 kilometers. Obviously, there was an elevator. And then we showed that a flat building could occupy the entire ground and come closer to the street, which is the place where you perceive the building. Instead, a high building could be far from the street, and so by the perspective, look it smaller. Totally fake, but sometimes you need it. But the real things is, look at the plan on the right, is that you gain the entire plot. So we could use the natural slope to clean the water and recycle the water of the buildings. And so we decided to go for it, and then at a certain point we say to ourselves, okay, but we will lose it. I mean, if we just arrive with a block in the middle of nothing, we will never get the competition. So we were like, can we use the surrounding to create something that kind of integrate this block with the nature? And honestly, everyone's come with the same image. Very basic, from the intern to myself, we were like, okay, let's do a chameleon. Let's do we were younger, but let's do a building that can change. If the sky changed, the building could change. If there is a snow, the building look white or yellow in function of what's happening in the surrounding. And we start this story of observing the skin of the chameleon and try to kind of create the same things. So mix 2 materials, a concrete with a steel, and then from the steel have the reflection, and from the concrete have this strong connection with the ground. And that was the image at the time for the competition, where you see the green, and then you see the white version, and then you see the greenish version. And then we did these details, to say we know how to do. Look at that, it looked very realistic. And then we won, and we did it, which was, we had the patent of this facade, which was a very pedagogic also for us experience, because it was one of the first, extremely technical as a system. But the first things we did, and this is a suggestion for your student, once we want, I called the clients, said, we have no idea how to do this facade. And that's very important, because, you know, for architects, people expect that we know everything. You know, when I go, sometimes I go in like a dinner, and there is a problem with a fountain, and someone called it to me, but you are architect, to what with electricity, same things. We should know everything, going from techniques to whatever is the things. Okay, we are superior, but we cannot know everything. So I think it's very important that you know which is your job. Your job is to drive the boat, and then when you need, you ask to other people. And you have to make the others understand that you are just the captain. You don't know how to use the winch. So the point was that I say to the client, I have no idea, but we can build up two teams. One team which will work with you, changing the plans, evolving the project, and do everything. And another team just for the facade. So give me a month, and I will find the right engineer that knows and that can develop with us this facade, which doesn't mean that he knows how to do just alone. He can do that just because you are there and you say, you know what you want, or mostly you know what you don't want, and then you go step by step in the direction where you want to go. So we did it. It was an extremely long, you know what, I will show you a movie of how you build one panels to give you the sense of this epic adventure. Such a get told. I read on the right land 2010. It's 8 years that I showed the same movie. So by the way, this is the mold of one panel. So the first things we had to develop the piece, the stud, which which is a chrome stud. So you have to protect the surface to have the mirror at the end, and you have to put it in a very precise position. Then you have to build the structure in the back, and this structure you have to develop the glue to make the structure without change the chrome on the surface. So first of all, we developed the glue. Second of all, we found this anchor which resists to traction and rotation. And then an intern from the studio came and said, you know, to find the right position, let's make a projector on the top, which give it a three-point, a triangle, and you know where you have to glue these things. It's the triangle you see there. And then we open a position for the tree village. Say if you want to come to glue the studs, no one showed up, but I mean, it was like a democratic participative approach. And so it's there, which sounds very easy, but we have done like 1,000 prototypes of these things. And then you have two film on the stud, one which you used to glue the first time, then the film stays, the second one stays on the stud, and then you clean up to protect until the last step of the process. So there are like 10,000 studs each panels. It's a colored concrete that clean itself. There is a material inside that doesn't allow life to go there, and you put it on the top, and then you add the structure in gray. The panel is 18 meters long, which is the maximum that you can transport. And as you can see here, the film stays on the mold, and the other one stays on the studs. And then one of the objectives was also to clean and to sand the concrete to make it less artificial, so to make the concrete as a stone, as the ground. And so we make an add pressure mixture between sand and water. That's why the second film. As you see, we opened the surface of the concrete. And then there is a third move when just with an high pressure water, the studs will be cleaned. And you can see how works the reflection there. So obviously, there was only one guy that could build these panels. And he was in the other part of France. So 2 by 2, they were transported from those places to the construction site, passing by villages like that. And that is just overscaled, but it's the same things of whatever is the cladding, you put it straight. We had to develop, whatever you see in red, we had to design for the construction site, because the panels were too big. And then you turn it and you just fix it. Obviously, the client was totally passionate, so he put millions of cameras on the construction site. So you will see 24-hour accelerate there. And what is nice, I think, is the fact that without any windows, without any interaction, the facade still creates something with what's happening in the surrounding. So you have really to understand that one of the questions of the project was, this is a not used site. I mean, things are there, and people come once in a year. So architecture without uses, still architecture or not? That was one of the main questions of this project. And I think the answer came, wow, now it's very dangerous what I will do. Yes. Yeah, those are the details, the panel, the fire doors. I mean, we were really like into design. Even the limit, you imagine that all this effort, the city is totally securized. So the idea was how to hide the limit, and we used this English system, which is called AA. It's called AA because people like approach it and then they follow in the hole. They said AA. And so these AA systems, which is just an enclosure in an under pressure part of the ground where there you have plant, allow to see a continuous landscape without seeing the securization of the site. So the idea is to reach this abstraction. That's why I was speaking at the beginning of form that has power in itself, where you cannot feel the scale. You can blur your eyes, and you see exactly the same things. It's just an archaic form which is there. You cannot see the scale. You cannot understand what's happened, but something happened. And then you have the inside. Also, when the site is used, I mean the trucks come to bring things, the logistic part is under the ground, so you don't see that from the surrounding. And then there is an office where you enter here. Everything is around the patio. We had a lot of money to do this project. It's the opposite of the first one. So you are around this patio, and only 8 people works there. It's the most luxurious office you can find. Everything goes in this panorama. And they come one in a year. For the rest, it's closed. They have this fantastic terrace. Here they are. Lucky guys. The archive in itself. And you know, at the answer, is this architecture or not, there is a story that I tell every time in each lecture, but it's nice. When we finished the building, the landscape designer, which is called Bas, he called me and said, Umberto, you should come. Something happened with the building. And because the people from the surrounding, they literally have nothing to do. from these three villages. They bring their cousin or their friends or they themselves just. They stayed on the street and they wait for the sunset. And the only way to see the sunset is through this image and this facade. So if you go there, probably starting from February, you can see people on the street, just like that, watching this box, which is extremely nice. And because by the reflection, the sun is very far and is in the other side, and there is a kind of mountain, so you cannot see it, but you can see it through the facade. It has become a piece of landscape. So a nuclear archive has started the process to become something which is totally linked to the way they live there. And that was kind of very nice for a very young architect like I was at the time. So forms, those that go beyond the immutability status of scientist belief, exist in virtue, I presume, of the universal secret code that preside over the slow birth of inevitable forms. I suggest you that you buy this book because it's amazing. It's Roger Caillois, and it's just a cut in stones. And every time he cuts the stones, he can find an incredible rich story, which is like this one, as you can see. It's just stratification of things that generate forms. And you know, there are these kind of archaic forms. One of them, what we search as an architect, I think what I search, it's the idea of how you can generate something which is readable and which takes the power of to be autonomous. A form which is autonomous, he takes his own story, far from the architect that created the form itself. One of the most incredible forms that has changed the history of contemporary art, it's the propeller, this one. How do you call it? Helica? Ellipse. Ellipse. So this first Ellipse, is a French, was showed at the Grand Palais in 1912 in the aeronautic fair, the first aeronautic fair in France. And in this fair, there was Marcel Duchamp, Constantin Brancusi, just going around the fair. And Marcel Duchamp, speaking with Brancusi and looking at this Ellipse, saying, it's done. The painting, it's done. Art is done. Could you do better than that? Tell me, who could do better than that? The ellipse, which was generated by just wind, controlling the wind, controlling the movement, being lighter, being aerodynamic, became too strong that it became a form in itself. This form, the day after, the years after, 1930, Duchamp started the ready-made. From this idea that when a form becomes autonomous, arts stop. So the project after, doesn't have the ambition to be neither an ellipsis, neither a ready-made, but the process was this one, was how you can generate a form which is just the result of the surrounding that impacted the form. And the surrounding was very sensitive for me because it was, so you are youngest, but when I studied, the Bible was small, medium, large, extra large, Rem Koolhaas. So you were even not acceptable if you don't have the first version, the one with the orange letters. And there was a theory that goes on in this moment where he started to define, which was called bigness. The idea that architecture could be extremely big and building could become block where all the tension and the power of the compromise in the surrounding could be absorbed by this form. So you don't, in his mind, you have not to start a conception of the city from the street or from the square or from the surrounding. It's just about make a big dimension that can absorb feedback from whatever is the context in the surround. And his first experience was in Lille. He won the competition and he tried to make the bigness become reality. Using this idea that Lille was in the middle of Europe, in the middle of important country, which is the case. Lille is 1 hour from London, 1 hour from Paris, 1 hour from Holland, if we consider Holland a big country. But Bruxelles, Bruges. And that was, I want to show you the sketch. That was the first sketch of Koolhaas And that was almost the second one. There is this fantastic book that it's rare, it's called Lille. And then he ends up with that, which became that. So we were invited 20 years after to do the last small pieces of the master plan of Rem Koolhaas, which I had studied as a student. So it was like Le Complexe d'Oedipe. I was in Lille, watching there, and I felt so proud of me. And I said, I have to do something incredible. But I discovered that the last piece was a very small building in a triangular land, extremely close to the cemetery, that between all these plaques and masses and building gigantic, was just the ground that no one's want. So not starting from the street when you conceive the city means that at a certain point, but things remains left and right, and one of these was this building. But in the same time, it was the end of the axis of the project, which megalomaniac as it is, he called Avenue Le Corbusier, in the middle, which in 20 years will change Avenue Rem Koolhaas. And then you arrive there, you visit the district, and you discover that all this, you can feel the bigness. You can really feel it, because the life, it's a place where there is a misunderstanding between this old lady, the dog, and the bigness of the buildings. No life, believe me, except the one which is given by the train. There is something that, so the city in itself decided to do Euralille 2, which is like go down with the scale, try to make it more domestic, try to mix more. And we were exactly in this phase where we had to complete these monsters with towers and things extremely big, but we had a very small building to do it. I mean, we decided to take this responsibility. No one's asked for. We could just... And then start the second part of Euralille. So the building is the one that you see there in copper, not the one there, not the fake copper, the real copper there. And it has been generated just by the forces of the site itself. We asked ourselves, whatever was the program, as you understand, we really don't care about the fact if it's housing, office, or whatever. We work with formats that have to allow buildings to guess things. And if they guess more than what it's the demands, it's better. So this one has been generated by the idea of being a kind of very clear signal from the peripheric, from the highway, being a tower that has to complete the main axis, being the beginning of the changing the scale for the development of the future, and being a corner building when you see it from the station. So as you see, a tower from the axis, a signal from the highway, the beginning of the changing scale in the ground, where we constitute this switch, the corner building from the station, and then we changed the scale to develop this housing system on the right. And what is nice is that it's an office building that there is no typical plan. Each plan is different, and now each plan it's nice because it attracts people that was not supposed to be there, you know, like small structures, startup, or even more interesting company, et cetera, et cetera. Just by the fact that you have different size, so you can put together different kind of demands. The facade is very easy. It's made by the idea of highlight what's happened 360 degrees on surrounding, so they are made by windows. And 4 systems. One is total glass, second one is glass plus copper, the third one is glass plus windows, windows and copper, and fourth one is totally opaque. So it's that, the 4 system. And we turn this system. Okay, last, and then we start to school. So I love this one because I think we cannot write that now. And this Lille project is a good step to show you what we think about materials. But Aristotle wrote, the materials, the matter desire the forms as a complement in the same way the female could attract the male. You imagine today you cannot say that. And materials design the form like a woman attract a man. It's totally sexist. But extremely interesting in another sense when you put with this one, which is matter must continue its natural life. When modified by the end of the sculpture, you can change the architect. Matter should not be used merely to suit the purpose of the artist. It must not be subjected to preconceived ideas and to preconceived forms. Matter itself must suggest subject and form. Both must come with matter and not be forced up and without. The idea that, and we believe in that, there is a strong connection between, remember the picture of Sugimoto. To read the form has to be the ensemble, as Matisse said, the element that has to be read. So materials just goes with. Materials are the tools we have to make the form readable. And when a form is readable, people use it. If I put you there, a cube of 45 centimeters, you will sit on the cube. If it's 1 meter, you will stand. It's the same thing with the cities. When I understand what it is, when I understand how I can use it, I will use it. So the process we do with materials is a kind of process of abstraction where we design things to make the form readable. I just want to slide with you different facades we have done, but it's every time the same. The idea is how to kind of eliminate the function, the reading of the windows of the bathroom, the windows of the bedroom, in an entire system and I'm not saying that is the only way to do architecture, I'm saying that is what we are interested in, is how you shape forms that are readable. Okay, I will pass this one, just so the image, but this is our first urban system where we have all what we have done as the first time that we use it in a large scale to build a district, but I think we can go over because I will speak about Haussmann, which is more interesting in this debate. Let me pass the slide. But this is an housing building, which exactly show what I am saying. Okay. So then I start to teach. In the first 10 years of the practice, I decided to not teach because I was like too focused in the office. And then at a certain point, after the Haussmann exhibition and the research that we had done for 2-3 years, I decided that it was the moment probably to try to share our knowledge or try to engage something with pedagogy. And I still don't consider myself as a teacher, as a professor, to be sincere. I'm too humble for that. And my father and my mother, they were real professors. The deal I had with the school where I was, with Columbia, and with EA now, it's the idea that I almost teach what I really know, but it's more I do things with students. And we try to do that together like it was in a practice. So what I ran in Columbia was a perfect exercise of project. And what I'm doing in EA, it's almost the same. But so it's a project in Paris under certain condition, which is I push the student to be in the most realistic, and I do that because it was America before, and now because I'm in in a kind of a crazy system, which is the EA. But I give them the maximum constraint that I can. So the fire constraint, urban rules, money problem, typology, whatever is things, I really put them in a very realistic frame. And then I say, show me that in this frame, you can be free as you want, as you were the years before in another studio where you were free to decide everything. And this exercise, which is, it's very, what I'm trying to do, it's almost what I realized after 10 years of being an architect, 10 years like with the practice, is the fact that architecture is still something extremely personal. I really believe that architecture is art. And so you have this, you have technology, you have to deal with people, you have to speak millions of languages to speak with the different people that deal with you, but at the end is a personal research. And is a place where you have to find your own freedom in a system which is extremely constrained, but it could be the same constraint that an art piece is. At a certain moment, an artist that deals with color, he will find the limit of the color. So the same thing is, we should see in ourselves, which is the world that we want, and how we can use each project to make pieces of this world which is very far. And this is an artistic path. So to do that, we should learn how to deal with clients, how to deal with the other people, without losing our mind and without losing our focus in a very personal path and research. So what I do, I try to create whatever is the studio, this cage where the student fit in, and then I have the entire studio to make them say, no, you are not enough crazy. No, you are not enough personal. No, you are victim of the rules that I give to you. And that's a funny exercise that teach me a lot, too. And it started in Columbia, but it's going on in the AEA now. And the studio is called Form, City, and Density. Obviously, it starts with Haussmann, because I explain them and I share with them what we learn from this research, which is enough interesting. I show them the building, as I just showed you. That was the exhibition. But then I explain to them the flexibility of the block, the fact that Paris is an intense city, how works the tree network of the city, like the first network, second network, how to make, this was a comparative study that showed how Paris is intelligent. So as I said, this is the document of density. So you have to imagine that Paris has the same density of Shanghai, without towers. So first of all, you should understand how these things work, how you generate density without using vertical system. Then it's a project. As I said before, you have the same amount of building and street, which were built in 50, 60 years. It's in terms of network, so we go from a master plan to a details in the entire semester in Columbia and now years in AEA. The idea is they have to reach an urban approach that I could read in their details at the end. It's a bit what we try to do in the studio. It's like start from the city and go until the last piece of the building with the same idea. And so I show them how the network works and the fact that this network, extremely well connected, generates the most pedestrian city in Europe. Paris is the city that, where people walk, the displacement by walk is the most elevated in Europe. And that works because, it's very long, but I will not do the lecture, but because there is 3 levels of network and connection, so the Haussmannian urbanization was made to connect long distance, but in the same time create an extremely efficient local connection. And then I show them the conception of the public space. This is amazing in Paris. If you take Place de l'Opéra, the void has exactly the same size than the building. Place de l'Opéra has the same size of the opera. Théâtre de Châtelet has the same size of the theater, Place de Châtelet. La Madeleine is 3 times the same size of La Madeleine. There was a consciousness of designing the void, which was made by rules of 45 degrees, to allow the buildings to have light, to allow a certain dimension. The point in Paris is how you can make the smallest and efficient void. So every time there is a kind of consciousness between what you have to build around the void and how you make this void efficient, whatever is the scale. And that, and then I explained then how works the services in the cities. Paris, we decided to use as a model because it's the city which has the most elevated number of service in kilometers square, which makes the city alive. Shops, magazine, library, whatever is the things. How works the blocks? The blocks is very interesting because it's an addition of building, but in the same times, it's by the fact that Haussmann imposed the facade, which also means that imposed the alignment, which also means that whatever is the building, the slabs are aligned. With the times, the block is one building or the addition of 10 buildings. And this extremely flexibility was also a tool to generate this resilient system in the city. So every time I challenge them saying, okay, your block, how it works. Can I generate from your block another configuration in 10 years? What will happen, et cetera, et cetera. They can say yes, they can say not, but we started from this, just studying that. And then, you know that with the exhibition, we had to classify all the blocks to understand which was the typical blocks. And we discovered, so we classified, we redesigned everything, we classified by family, like six phase, 5 phase, 4 phase, 3 phase, and exception. And you discover an amazing things, which is whatever is the form of the block, whatever is its size, whatever is its geometry, they have exactly the same density. From a block of 20 meters long, a block of 1 kilometer long, they have exactly the same density. You see the perimeter going up in the 3 phase, 4 phase, 5 phase, and then the density staying regular. And this is because the ratio between the void and the plenty part, it's proportional, and then the height is the same. So it's a fractal logic where wherever you take a piece of the city, it drives, in terms of density, the same characteristic of the entire city. So I give to them the objective to reach that too, to stay, whatever they do, they have to have the same density than the rest of the city. And then I explained then the property building, and so the flexibility, and the question of identity. This is a picture where you don't have a monument, you don't have square, you even don't have a street, and you know that you are in Paris. There are not many cities in the world where the ADN of the city, it goes until the smallest scale, go until the guardrail, until the windows. So thinking the city starting from the small pieces, it's something that I ask for in the studio. And that's very interesting because it's something that we have totally lost. By the fact that today materials come from everywhere in the world, by the fact that today each architect has to have his own signature, which has been like that every time, but now it's more global. But we are not able to think the cities by the small pieces that gives back identity of the city. In that case, it was not a choice. It was just, those are different pictures, but look at that. Every time you are in Paris, even just the chimneys. And so what we do, we draw, we classify, we measure, we compare, and we conclude. That's the first part of our courses. And this is nice. This is, on the left, is the void extruded of Paris, which really looks like a contemporary project. If you build a city now, it will be more close than the one on the left and one on the right. So the void is a project in itself. What I try to do with the student to make them understand that architecture is not the building, it's how the building affects the void. And even in the building, it's not the wall, it's how the wall defines this void. And so we do that from the traces to blocks to building, and every time you have this black and white system that they drives for the entire years. This is the lottery I showed to the AEA, and we add the fact that they have to design pieces at the end, so the small details. So term 1 is 12 weeks, term 2, it's really practical. I just take the slide for the presentation that I did in September. So we are on the term of 12 weeks where they finish the urban approach. So they have studied what I just showed you, and they arrived with a master plan and a volume. I don't give them the program. They don't know if it's housing, office. I give them thickness. They go from 12 meters to 6 meters of the things. And they have to build a narrative and an approach, a critical analytical approach of their project without using one of the cards that really students love, which is, I will make a co-working space, I will make a super student housing, no. So it's all about, this is the city, how you relate to the city without using program. Then terms 2, the programs arrive. So they will change their own approach because they will be confronted to housing in this system. And then and so I make them, what I do is very simple. I take, this year I have 14 students, I take 14 case study. They have 2 weeks to redesign it, to understand how works distribution in housing and how works typology. Then they share this knowledge and they start to design their own housing in the master plan they have done. And at the end of term 2, buildings are done, and then they pick up 1 or 2 buildings to go over until the details, and so the last image. So term 1, term 2, those are the sites these years. So this was in Colombia. We are used to do huge model where they have to confront themselves to the form of the city. And then the entire years, they will work in this different scale of the model that we have done at the beginning. So these years, we have 12 sites. I just pick up some. It's every time. In Colombia, I was used to have 1 site for all the students. In the AA, because we have 1 year and not a semester, I decided to use different sites where they can confront themselves to different cases. And then term 2, they do the building. Term 3, they do the details and the materiality. And I will show you some image of what they have done in Colombia the years before. Those are some student projects. Very LAN, I have to say, yeah? But it was not done on purpose. No, believe me. And obviously, I ask for everything. Because the funny things that, I don't know in the AA, but in Colombia, students, they work a lot. So you can really, you can ask for what you want. You can even be cynic, yeah, this is an horrible project. But I show you also to say that this was last year. So let me end. What I try to do is probably, I just found this definition, which I really like. I found this definition 1 month ago, and it comes from Auguste Perret. Auguste Perret, which is not a theoretician, it's someone that with his brother, he has an enterprise to build concrete, and then he was the architect that built. So you have a lot of millions of examples in Paris of fantastic architecture. And looking at eggs and speaking with one friend of him, he said that, which I think to create a metaphor of what is an architecture, I think it fits perfectly with our idea and what we do in the studio. Here is a model of architecture. Auguste Perret tells me, show me a splendid ostrich egg made of an incredibly polished and fine material, ranged according to a beautiful curve. It contains a whole life, an infinitely complex mechanism enclosed within a perfect form of pure limestone. In a sample form, devoid of all ornament, a soft and serene forms. The complex in the sample is expressed by the sample, a beautiful material arranged according to a beautiful form. Such must be the beauty of modern architecture. And he was referring to that, and I will use this image, so a life inside the form that generates a space around the form in itself with the skin to end up this lecture. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Humberto. It has been a wonderful lecture. We have like 15 minutes for questions. So, any questions?
Okay. Humberto, thank you very much for what you have shown up. I think you made quite an, I'm trying to make it a question, right? I think you made quite a statement about not only the value of the existing city as something, as an object of reflection, but the logics, the way the logics of the existing city can be implemented as tools for building the city of tomorrows, as you say, in this Paris Haussmann thing. So I want to ask you like two things. One thing is, when this Haussmann thing happens within the office work in these 15 years, more or less, if it's more like a reflection on your work or it's something you make, I mean, I assume it's not as clear as it happened this time and it's a reflection or it's a projection to the future, but something much more mixed up. But I would like you to explain that a little bit more. And the second one is, do you think that, or do you consider yourselves, by making this big understanding of this big reading of the city of Paris, like belonging to this kind of family of studies, of books that have been like wonderfully developed by practicing architects on their own cities, and that have the power to be like design instruments. And I'm thinking particularly in this Rio Metropolitano, for instance, which was launched in 2014 about Rio de Janeiro, and it's quite a study on what's happened there, or the very famous and very well-known like Made in Tokyo, right? So can you explain us something more about that thing, on how the connections are traced between both worlds?
Yeah, obviously the choice to work in Haussmann was not made it in 2 days. The importance we give to the city, it's a bit everything, but then you become conscious of things that, when you start a practice, you have a lot of, you have extremely clear idea, and you work in saying and working around dogma. And then you discover that in reality, you know where you don't want to go, but you have to take your time to understand where really you want to go. So when Haussmann was the moment where we really did a psychoanalysis of all our production before, and we understand which was the interest and how things has been generated without being consciousness. But the importance of the city is there since ever, probably because I'm Italian, probably because cities is what we do better than everyone else, and I'm sorry for you guys, but no, I'm joking. But the importance of a building as a piece of a large form that has to continue or not this form, but anyway, it has to be related with. I think it's in the blood of all the people that has lived around the Mediterranean. Just because the city is like that, and it's so I think I have that since ever. The interest of I think I'm an architect because I want to build cities, and so consciousness, you arrived in that point. But Haussmann was extremely interesting, and it was done just by chance because we really did the project and the first study for the competition, the Black building. Then I met someone from the city. I said, come to visit the building. I said to him, I have built an immeuble de rapport, an Haussmannian building today. The guys came and I explained him everything. And he said, why you don't do an exhibition? We can finance it. So the city gave us the money to make the research. We started the research. And it was kind of incredible because the way Paris has been generated is very fascinating. You can find things and things, but the most incredible things is that we were allowed to use, for the first time in an urban study, a 3D file. Now we are doing that in London. A 3D file, which cities has been working on since 10 years. I don't know if Madrid has that But Paris was like, with London and even New York, they started to create this 3D file of the city, okay, which is informed with data. So each piece has how the building is done, who lives there, which is the materials, when it has done, is there a modification, how is used, what is in the ground, how far is the first metro, how many cars pass every day. So there was 1 million of data, and we built up a team just to create software, script in Rhino, I mean, the students know what it is, that allow us to read this data. So we spent like 6 months, and what I was interested is, you know, in master planning and cities, you can say everything and its opposite. So, you know, it's very charming, because for years, the type block in Paris was a triangle. You know, the Haussmannian representation of the block through the different theoreticians, there was a triangle. You know that there are more squared block than triangle? And you discover things, this history, this density things was amazing. When we shows up with the fact that we are searching for the typical block in Paris, and we understood at the end that whatever is the block has the same density, then you generate other questions, how this work? Why is interesting? So that was amazing, and I think that honestly, the book is very like, for me, it's a tools to design, but I'm very happy with the result, and it's not a case. We have sold 18,000 copies, and we are in the 4th edition, because if you have to work in Paris, and if you have to understand the city, this is a complete work. But it's not a complete work because we have done it, but because we were allowed to use technology that was not there before. And so this technology, the software, and then the lecture of that was ours. So that's the interesting part, or not. This is the part that you can criticize. But this is a new process. Now we try to do that with London in a more natural way. Like it's more about green space in the city. But it's very interesting the moment where you can really study it, when you can understand the form, and be sure of what you say, because for the rest it's just interpretation. You know, it's like, it's very complex. You can find every time in the theory of the city, you have the black and the white. So what I like is this data system that allow us now, all of us, because the technology has to be useful sometimes, it is in this case, to reread the city. I don't know if...
Questions?
Umberto, I'll try to make it like short and understandable. You were talking about architecture without architects somehow when you were explaining Haussmann and the fact that he was making this whole city in 60 years, and no one knows who are the architects designing that facades that you were showing us. No, there is a system, so there are no architects. No, and you were also talking about the fact of non-programmatic architecture, but like we could say typological or something like that, architecture, like typology against program. So that's very interesting from the point of view of architecture without architects, we could say. And on the other side, you were talking about the act of art, no, as a decision of the architect, no. So participation in the first case, no, there is a system where you can like pick rules and participate in front of like the architect making choices and making decisions on where to place the little round mirrors, no, with that triangle. So this is a very like design artistic decision. Mm. So can you deepen on that idea? Maybe also talking about this for our students.
The lecture is recorded. Yes. See, yes. Yes. Okay. No. So I don't allow you to record that part that I will say, but I will say it. Participation, it's bullshit. But I have done a district in Hamburg, okay, which so it's a funny story. I don't present it because honestly it's my worst project, but it's okay. We did an international competition on a master plan. Open international competition. It was summer before, you know, like end of June, we said to ourselves, okay, let's do it. We did it like in 2 weeks. And we won the competition for the development of one neighborhood just on the south of Hafen City in Hamburg. It's called Williamsburg, like the one in New York. So we started this adventure being before the master plan designing, and then when we end up the design of the master plan, they told us, was IBA. IBA is our institute that normally are in charge of developing new district. There is an IBA for Potsdamerplatz, an IBA for whatever is the project. So IBA told us, so now let's do competition for each block. And I said, can I be invited? He said, yeah. So we did the competition. And then it was totally German. You know, German, they are the hyper-democratic city because of their own past. So the competition was very strange. You design, and then you have a room like that. And there was an announcement on the main journal of Hamburg, project search for client. And so, as an architect, you had no jury, you had a stand, okay? And you have to sell your own project to the public that came inside the room. And even more interesting. So when I understood that, I put there the most beautiful girl in the studio, an Italian from Naples that know how to deal, and a German one. And that was my stand. And the color was orange. So the point is that all the citizens, they come, almost 1,000, they come in the room, and they say, I like this project, orange, okay. And then they have another room, and they can meet between them in the other room and say, you're orange, I'm orange too. What do you do? And he said, like, I'm a lawyer. Okay, I'm a lawyer too, so let's buy the building. And they constitute group, and this system is called Baugruppen, group for construction. And they came in the other side and said, we would like to buy that. And in function of who take what, the different block was distributed. We were lucky, we won the entire district. So everyone was orange, and we bid up that with this Baugruppen, submitted each decision to a vote. Each decision. From the windows, to the energetic label, to the position of a doors, the typology of an apartment, and they were allowed, during the process, to sell the apartment, and the one that comes inside has the same right than them on the beginning. It was 3 years of a nightmare, a real nightmare. You have no idea. But you know what I discovered is exactly like politics. When you have to make an average decision that makes everyone happy, it will be very rare that this decision can be ambitious. And this decision can be radical. Because it has to be understood, it has to be shared, and when I tell to them on my first speech, I said, guys, I'm here, and I have translated, I'm here, I don't care about you, you will die before my building, so let's try to understand each other. Every time there is a strong decision, I will explain you why it's strong for the city, and then you have to make that in your mind that it's not only your building, even if you pay. So, I mean, I did this nice speech, but it was like, they were like, okay. And then for 3 years, I had to fight, but at the end, it's a very basic system. We just made a grid, because it was the only solution to fit all the, but what ends up at the end, okay? At the end of the process, if you go there, it's very nice. It's very nice, it's very hipster. You go and it's the nice paradise. I have homosexual building, all the homosexuals are in one building, the lawyer, dentist, then there are the artist. I mean, you go there and it's the opposite of the city, the opposite. The city is beautiful because you don't know your neighborhood. Yes, you can be rich and decide to live in one district, but even there, you will be surprised. You will be surprised by something. That's the city. That's urbanity is the moment where your small ego will be confronted to millions of small ego, and in this kind of negotiation, you grow up. In that case, it's a ghetto. It's a ghetto of something. You know, there is the architects, it's fun, yeah? The architects, they are all in the same building. It's a building which is like the good relationship with the price, they have no money, so they pick up the most potential one, but honestly it's the shitty one, and then they start to fight with me to change everything. So I had also to deal with others and say, guys, I mean, you're an architect. But at the end, the point is that how do you win, and that's very, I mean, something which is very delicate. Could be the process of the project democratic? Could be a process of a radical choice democratic or not? If I ask you which are the cities you like, you will name probably 5 cities which has been done by dictator, by a moment of, you know, Paris is fantastic, but Napoleon was an horror. The fantastic street that I'm speaking about, they were there to control and kill the people. The point is that sometimes the fascist architecture is amazing. It's amazing, honestly. But the point is, we should take the maximum of the space and like the politician, we have to make the other understand that we know. It's not about making the other to participate to the decision, no. It's like taking the maximum of the power, because probably in that space, we will do a small move, because we can only do a very small move, because the rest is controlled by economy, limit of the construction, limit of the rules. Whatever we do, we already are in a system totally controlled. So taking the maximum of space, I hate the people, the architects that say we should to participate, we should to enlarge, we should put salad on the garden and plants on the balcony. I mean, you know, that's my small opinion. But honestly, I have the experience to tell you, my worst project is the one that involves all those people.
Okay, so
I have a question about the identity and specificity, because you showed that some images of Paris without just details of, or windows or chimneys of Paris, saying that everyone is able to recognize the city, because it's in a way, it has some characteristics and some features that are repeating. And in your facades, which I really like, what was interesting is they were all different, but in a way they were the same system. And when I saw them, I thought, okay, but how do they deal with the specificity and with the identity of the place or the city or the program? Because of course,
I don't care about the program, you know. But
no, it's,
no, I understand the question, and
I just want to add something, which is because I mean, I really perceive that it's the point, the fact that something that can be very specific and at the same time very flexible. So I would like you to go a little bit deeper.
No, I agree with you, and honestly, I don't have the solution. Each project is a trial where we try to put together this enough generic system and archaic form, which is almost autonomous, so without context and things that can kind of stand and survive by himself and answer to a program. But the program is temporary, you know. Things never stand. So the point of architecture that face the time is why, ask yourself why one building is destroyed and another one no. Why we keep something and we don't keep something else. And working on the Grand Palais, is teaching me a lot of things on that. But so give this space to the forum to move. This potential is interesting. Which kind of reading you have to have from the language point of view? If the identity is linked to language, I don't know. In Paris, it's very easy because all those things is not. I didn't show that to say that they are repetitive. I showed that to say it's a small scale that is used to build an identity. The small scale of each. So we are doing, for example, now we are urbanist of one district in Bordeaux. And just in a basic way, we impose to all the architects that build there, whoever they are, to use 2 materials and 2 types of guardrail. Okay, I don't think that I frustrate them to saying that, because then when they end up with the project and I am watching what they are doing now and what we are doing all together, things are very different. But the idea of sharing some small details in a very little scale that goes back to the identity of the city, I think it's interesting. Then, yes, our facade, but I just showed the generic one, but our facade, it's a big deal. I think that the black building is a Parisian building at the end, because he has been generated, and he has the strong intelligence of a Parisian building. It's a corner building, so the plot is Parisian in itself. And we didn't go over with that because we felt that was enough. But participate relate to the language of the place where you are building, it's a big question. And honestly, I think the answer another time is specific on. Anyway, I don't know if I'm able to do it. Simply, we try every time, but this reading of, once you go there, when you go in language, vocabulary, and the writing of the city, that things become very complex. But anyway, I think you keep what I'm saying. It's just think the city in a very small scale, and then charge the form of potential, and then try to be most truly that you can.
Thank you very much. I think we're closing here. You have a...
From the point of view of the students, maybe they have a feeling of your lecture. I think we can reduce the argument, very reduced. I think Duchamp talked about the propeller. He was looking about the future, but I have the feeling that you have talked a lot about Haussmann. It's the past. Should the architects look to the future or to the past? It's a question. You can develop as you want, but it's a feeling.
It's a good question. But you are a bit like me. I think students they have their own voice. That's your question. And your question is, should an architect has to look at the past? Yes. Yeah, because, and this is something that I try to teach, that in Italian we say, non dobbiamo inventare l'acqua calda. When things are already there, we don't have to invent them, and we should learn a lot from them. So the capacity of reading what is there, it's amazing. But then, what do you do with this background? It's thinking about the future. And for me, the future it's another thing. Architecture is politics. It's politics in the sense of an architect is one politics animal that decides through his construction to vehiculate and pass messages of the world he would like to be. And so that projection, the word project, I'm sure that you know that the word project means throw something in avanti, far. It's just put things farthest. So this one, obviously we look at the past, but each project is a bet, and it's a moment where we throw things to the future. So it's a complex, it's very schizophrenic position for an architect, because you cannot not look back, because or you will just do obvious things. I have this problem at the EA. I arrived there, and all the students say to me, we should think outside the box. Okay, let's think outside the box. But you should have a box. First of all, which is your box? And this kind of being original to be original, or try to revolutionize the world, or try to, some architects use evolution, not revolution, or a Darwinian system, or this kind of, honestly, I think it's important to know from where, because we have done a lot of things very good, and sometimes we're just changing a few pieces, but changing, I don't know, I don't know if we did it, but our goal is to yes, you know, we invented the typology in Begle. I think that no one has done that before us, and no one probably will do after, because it's an economical nonsense, but that comes from the past. The type of flat shows up at the end comes from just a study of what has been done before, and then a small change on what could be. And I think our role is that, but then it's very complex. It's very complex. We are totally schizophrenic as a profession.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry we don't have more time for questions. It's 9:10, so thank you. Thank you very much.